Move out. Michael, the department head of our business partner, said, "Subcontractor, working with someone like you will bring our company down." Instead of taking a sip, he threw his coffee cup right over my sister Jessica's head. My sister gasped and frantically reached for a handkerchief to wipe the coffee stain off her outfit. Jessica was being embarrassed in front of me, despite the fact that she had always put me first and taken care of me since we were young. I was really furious with Michael for his ridiculous actions. My sister's cold voice cut through the air as I was ready to scream, sending shivers down my spine. "Can you give Mr. Thompson a call?" She glared at Michael with sharp eyes and stated, "I need to speak with him." Aaron is my name. I am in my 30s and I own and operate 15 businesses ranging from management consulting to producing and retailing leather goods to custom suit making. Despite being a part of a group of 15 firms, they all function rather differently because I launch businesses based on ideas that strike me at the moment. When a business takes off, I hand over day-to-day management to dependable staff members. The sense of accomplishment and joy I get from discovering new services and products that I wish were available is also quite great. It fascinates me to think about what business to launch next, but I know that my sister Jessica has played a big part in keeping me driven and aspirational. Because of our parents' negligence, we had very uncomfortable lives when we were little. We were shuffled between various relatives. My sister and I don't recall much about our parents as a result. When I became older, I understood why we kept changing schools, even if at first I didn't comprehend what was going on since I could see the reluctant looks on our relatives' faces when they took us in. "Don't worry, Aaron. I'll always protect you no matter what." I'm sure I would have broken down then if my sister hadn't said those words. When I was still very young and vulnerable, her words provided the emotional support I needed. However, she must have felt a great deal of strain from it. She cooked us meals, looked over school paperwork like a parent, and took care of me. In primary school, my sister experienced hearing loss, possibly as a result of all the stress. Instead of taking her to the hospital, our relatives told her to go to sleep, saying that it will get better. Consequently, the problem had gotten much worse by the time she complained of pain. Even with a hearing aid, her ears hardly work. Perhaps things might have worked out differently if she had gotten therapy sooner. Although she has a hearing aid, her problem is severe enough to interfere with her everyday life, and it seems that solutions such as a bone conduction device or middle ear implant were difficult to use in her instance. My sister never once complained, but the shock of losing her hearing must have been devastating. Her students made fun of her disease as a result of her illness, and our relatives treated her even worse after her hearing declined. But seeing Mom never give up and always go forward in spite of all the difficulties or barriers she encountered gave me the willpower to not get bogged down in my own problems. To say that my sister and I were like a team of two may sound conceited, yet depending on her taught me how to get by on my own. That's why I am aware that my sister is solely responsible for my success as an entrepreneur and business owner. I opened my eyes wide in astonishment when my sister, who I had looked up to since we were young, stated, "I'd like you to join me for this meeting." I was taken aback to see Jessica, who owns her own company and is often self-assured and forceful, beg for my assistance with such hesitancy. "It's not often that I see you uncertain, Jessica. Is this really such a difficult deal?" Although her business isn't as large as mine, she has managed it for a considerable amount of time. She should be accustomed to working with clients because she does the majority of the sales and negotiations herself. She must be in a very tough circumstance because she was begging for my assistance. I murmured this to Jessica, and she sheepishly shook her head. "I want to make sure this deal goes through because it's pretty significant, but I just can't seem to get along with the person in charge." She used to be a strong believer who never wavered when she was younger. However, since she's entered the professional world, she appears to be experiencing the challenges of mature social interactions. An individual is not necessarily a good person just because they occupy a prominent position in a big corporation. This client seems to be the kind of challenging person that nobody enjoys working with. I made the decision to go with my sister to the meeting as a way of saying thank you for everything that she has done for me. The location was a calm, private space that was ideal for talking about delicate subjects. Jessica was obviously anxious as she kept fiddling with the collar of her tailored suit and double-checking her appearance. I made the decision to pretend I worked at Jessica's company in case someone questioned because she had warned me, "Please don't mention that you run a company." Michael, the client, arrived a bit after the appointed hour as I was contemplating this. I apologize. I got distracted looking for a smoking area and forgot the time. Would you honestly use that as an explanation, even if it were true? As Jessica deftly handled the situation, I thought, we just arrived ourselves. Jessica didn't need to rely on sign language or any other kind of aid for the time being because of this degree of contact. Jessica's ability to carry on a coherent conversation despite her limited hearing and lip-reading abilities never ceases to astound me. Even though we had been waiting for quite some time and had come more than half an hour early, Michael seemed to take Jessica's remark at face value. Then, as if it were instinctive, he handed Jessica his jacket and remarked, "Then I should have taken more time for a smoke." I watched this discussion in silence until Michael gave me a questioning glance that suggested, "Who's this guy?" "I'm glad to have met you. My name is—" Michael interrupted me as I was getting up to introduce myself, stating, "I don't need an introduction from some low-level guy." I was happy that my worry was unfounded, and that he wouldn't question me about why we had the same last name. Michael's disagreeable attitude started to make me feel uneasy at the same moment. "Would you please just get me a drink? Make it black. I don't like sweet things." With hardly a glance, he threw the menu at Jessica and muttered this. With good reason, Jessica had a concerned expression when she stared at Michael. Jessica found it challenging to understand what Michael was saying and to read his lips because he had purposefully covered his mouth when issuing the instruction. Not only was his voice muffled, but he had covered his mouth so she could not possibly imagine what he'd spoken. Even though I didn't think it was necessary for him to be so petty, I also couldn't really criticize someone who was crucial to Jessica's company. I hit the button to summon the server, thinking it would be easier if I just took care of the order. But Michael gave me a stern look and told me to shut up, low-level man. I spend a lot of time determining whether my business partners are capable of handling simple exchanges. It's true that while doing business, it's critical to take into account not just the partner's business strategy, but also the enthusiasm and moral fiber of the organization's executives and staff. But it was obvious that Michael was trying to minimize Jessica with his behavior. He appeared to be making fun of someone who was disabled. "Excuse me, but what you're doing is." A firm grip closed around my arm before I could say anything more. Jessica, who was seated next to me, was firmly gripping my arm while shaking her head. Jessica was the one who made this arrangement, not my company. Even though I was against doing business with someone like Michael, Jessica had good reason to remain silent. I said nothing, honoring her request, and waited for the waiter to come get our order. I gave Jessica a gesture under the table that only she could comprehend. With my left hand, I traced a circle with 5 fingers, and with my other hand, I pretended to stir with a spoon. Jessica nodded slightly. I was relieved because it appeared the coffee sign had been received. "Please, 3 coffees. Might we also be able to get some damp towels?" I inquired. "I apologize," the waiter replied, apparently forgetting to bring the towels when we were seated, and then inquired about the cream and sugar. The dilemma was resolved when Jessica ordered all 3 coffees with the milk and sugar on the side. Jessica's hearing issue went unnoticed by the server because of how naturally she responded. As she'd previously stated, she developed the abilities to get by in day-to-day life since she was an adult. Michael watched the conversation between Jessica and the waiter in silence, perhaps recognizing there was nothing to find fault with. I found the entire exchange to be flawless. However, Michael slapped his hand down on the table when the server left and the coffee arrived. "Hey, how much more difficulty will you cause me? I requested that you get black coffee." Jessica was shocked by the loud sound and her shoulders shook. Taking offense at Michael's outburst, I spoke up for Jessica. "Pardon me, but I think you received everything you requested." Jessica had generously prepared for a wet towel in addition to the black coffee. The only thing you needed to do was not use the cream and sugar because they were placed separately. But Michael shook his head angrily, blurting out some silly justification. "I wouldn't need to use the spoon if I hadn't ordered the cream and sugar. I detest having a messy table, and I now have to cope with extra stuff on it." It was true, but there was a little container of cream and a spoon inside the saucer he used for his coffee. Even just getting those moved aside was giving him too much bother. He was grumbling. My wrath flared as I realized there was no cause to argue with him. But before I could say anything, Jessica knelt alongside me. "I apologize profusely for the inconvenience. I'm grateful for your continuing business and will make sure it doesn't happen again." Michael seemed pleased by Jessica's apology as he nodded. Even though I didn't believe them, I remained silent and observed their discussion. Let's dive straight in. I've put up a proposal that includes our parts cost and delivery schedule. Michael was given some documents by Jessica that she had taken out of her backpack. Michael took a quick look over the paperwork before slamming them onto the table. "This is absurd. Both the price and the delivery speed are excessively expensive. Reduce the cost in half and add 3 extra days to the delivery time. I'll purchase twice as many parts as I had initially intended if you agree." Regarding the estimate from Jessica's parts manufacturing company, Michael was putting out ridiculous expectations. Without going too further into the records, it was clear that Michael was making excessive demands. "I apologize, but that just isn't possible. Even though our staff members are trying their hardest, we are unable to meet those deadlines." Jessica labored to carry on the conversation, observing Michael's lips closely. Michael persisted in being unyielding, pressing his egotistical demands even harder. "Your revenue won't change if I buy twice as much, right? And the reason your business is moving so slowly is due to those pointless ideas about social responsibility. You should never even leave the house, people like you. You simply cause hardship for society." Such a comment was ridiculous in light of the cost ratios, but it appeared Michael was not very familiar with basic cost principles. The next thing he said made my blood boil. Jessica founded her business with the goal of assisting those who are socially disadvantaged, drawing on her own struggles. Her aggressive advocacy for hiring disabled individuals resulted in a decrease in production when compared to regular businesses. Her charges were greater because of this. Jessica had nevertheless put in a great deal of effort to get contracts and maintain her company. It was obvious that there was no way to increase the profit margin any further. Jessica made a valiant attempt to clarify, but Michael just laughed and yelled, "Go away, subcontractor. Dealing with individuals such as yourself will hinder my business." Michael grabbed up his coffee cup and poured it directly over Jessica's head, not taking a sip from it. Exclaiming, "Hot!" with haste, Jessica took out a handkerchief and wiped away the coffee that had seeped into her suit. The sister who had taken care of me since we were young and always put me first was now being embarrassed in front of me. My rage reached a breaking point due to Michael's ridiculous actions. I was ready to yell when Jessica spoke, her voice so icy that it made my skin crawl. "Maybe you give your president a call. I should speak with him first." She then gave Michael a chilly, steely gaze. Stunned by Jessica's abrupt transformation in attitude, Michael first appeared astonished before erupting into laughter. "I apologize. My fingers went slick. But you'd like me to give Mr. Thompson a call. What do you believe someone running a small business like you could potentially accomplish?" Jessica kept dabbing at the coffee mark on her shoulder with her handkerchief, as if she was still in disbelief at the stubborn stain. "I had the suit created at my place of business, and Jessica received it as a gift when she opened for business. Using the finest material, I had created it to fit her frame properly, so she could look confident during any discussion. Look, I apologize for the coffee. Since it wasn't deliberate, let's put it behind us. And this agreement is off too. Yes, it's a loss for us both, but let's go on and declare it even. It's obvious that Michael believed this would not really affect his business, but he was unaware of what was going to happen. It was not anything Jessica or I intended to forgive him for. We were going to absolutely destroy him. Observing Michael take off his coat and go, I made a self-promise to persevere. I started implementing my plan that same day. Equipment manufacture and distribution were two of the businesses that Michael's company, together with its subsidiaries, operated in. Since his business strategy and mine were so similar, I decided to open a rival eatery close to one of Michael's establishments. I had been considering starting a restaurant for some time, and this development just expedited the process, which was ideal for me. Michael's restaurant franchise, well known for having many locations, took great satisfaction in providing high-quality ingredients at affordable prices. We were ideal rivals because, coincidentally, I also valued premium ingredients and wanted to provide the public with that experience. I made significant investments in marketing and promotion when my restaurant first opened, and word of mouth quickly spread, making it one of the most difficult places to acquire a reservation. It was evident that Michael's patrons were gravitating toward my place, and we skillfully steered clear of the typical hazard faced by eateries that lose their appeal after a certain point in time. My secretary called me one day to let me know that someone wanted to talk to me. It was Michael when I answered. I gave in to his insistence that we have a meeting, provided it would only be brief and one time. Michael was in full shock when he saw me. He didn't realize I was the CEO. You're the person from that time. I cynically replied, Yes, I'm well aware of who you are, as I observed Michael repeatedly bend his head. I think we had a prior negotiation together. I had assumed back then that you were just a worker for that small business. I'm sorry, I didn't greet you correctly. He obviously hadn't grasped the fact that Jessica and I were related. I asked Michael what he wanted, frustrated by his persistent lack of respect. First and foremost, why are you visiting? I'm pretty busy, as I stated on the phone, I said icily. Michael clutched his hands uncomfortably as he gave his explanation for being here. I take it that your company has opened a few stores close to ours recently. Given how similar our business strategies are, I believed it would be advantageous for us to collaborate. As he continued, it was evident that Michael was suggesting that his business acquire my company. He was disturbed by the rivalry in the area, but he now desired to purchase my business in order to capitalize on the circumstances. Naturally, I had no plans to close my company. Silently opening the door, I gave Michael the all-clear to depart. Are you certain? I can take revenge in a lot of ways. Michael muttered, his voice filled with venom. Perhaps from his wounded pride, Don't come crying to me, will you regret it? I swallowed my want to respond and bit back a response. Instead, I stayed silent. Michael bit his lip and walked out, leaving a noisy trail of footsteps behind him. He presumably believed that I owned just restaurants, which is why he felt so entitled to address me in such a haughty manner. It is necessary to impart to individuals such as Michael the harsh realities of the commercial world. I grabbed up my phone and tapped the contact of a crucial person to plan my next step. I got a message the next day from the employees I put in charge of running the rival eatery. Upon opening the URL they gave, I was met with a plethora of defamatory remarks on our store. The same account has made multiple posts from the day before. Was this a revenge Michael had in mind? If that is the case, it was very immature and unethical. The posts were obviously aimed to scare away consumers because they were full of lies about food safety and insults directed at the employees. I offered the staff some instructions to calm them down, and they told me that none of these statements were accurate. I have total faith in all of you. Keep the remarks exactly as they are, but send a disclosure request and get in touch with the site authorities. This is more than sufficient justification to file a lawsuit. Together, let's clear your names." My secretary entered the room as though she was waiting for me to end the call. It appears that I was called. It was clearly Michael again, when she claimed it was from the person who wanted to meet yesterday. But I told my secretary not to answer the phone. "Sorry, please tell him I'm not interested in talking, and let him know that I'll be away on a business trip for a while, so I won't be available." Disguised as a business trip, I went back to work, trying to avoid Michael. I was going about my day when I saw Jessica's email on my phone. The text of the message said, "I want to thank you all for the other day. Well, Michael arrived in our office, and now things are becoming a little problematic. He simply won't go. Could you take care of this instead of me calling the police? That would worry the workers." As soon as I opened Jessica's email, I sighed. I take it that he went to disturb Jessica instead of trying to reach me. How shameless he had to be to show up at her office was something that kept crossing my mind. Something in me wanted to see his daring for myself, so I hurriedly dressed and went to Jessica's office. "Are you back from your travels?" As soon as he saw me, Michael exclaimed, "I've been hoping to see you." He came running over and took hold of both my hands. He had done a complete 180 from when he was bragging, "I won't forgive you, even if you regret it," not too long ago. Disregarding Michael's endeavors, I faced Jessica. "You mentioned that you were having some issues. What precisely took place?" I replied in basic sign language, and Jessica gave me a weary expression in return. "He won't leave. He's attempting to make me a new agreement now. But I don't have time for this because I've already begun working with another company." Michael jumped in quickly, saying, "I'm getting even greater terms than before because of this. I sincerely hope that our collaboration can continue." Jessica firmly shook her head, rejecting the proposition even though he begged. "We've already reached our limit. In addition, didn't you always whine about how ineffective my business was? You made it sound as though those of us with disabilities were an inconvenience to society." Jessica uttered, "I will never forgive you," with firmness. She said, "And furthermore, isn't the real reason you want to make a deal with my company because you're trying to keep ties with my brother?" Michael groaned, as though she had struck the mark, and then exclaimed, "Ugh," before bending deeply to his knees. "Mr. Thompson instructed me to plead for your pardon at all costs. Please, I beg you, please." I cast a harsh gaze down at his pathetic frame. I had recently gotten in touch with Mr. Thompson of Michael's business to let him know that my company would no longer be providing any of our products to them. We had been doing their primary marketing and promotion, as well as providing their uniforms at a reduced cost. Mr. Thompson, worried about what had transpired, quickly reached out upon hearing this. Mr. Thompson sighed deeply as I described Michael's actions in detail and promised to look into the matter. Michael had been frantically trying to get in touch with me and had even attempted to contact Jessica, so I'm sure Mr. Thompson got in touch with him straight away. Naturally, neither of us intended to extend our forgiveness to him. If you continue to stay here, I'll call the police, and I'll also inform Mr. Thompson." Michael's face became pale at the mention of Mr. Thompson and the police. Without saying anything else, he promptly gave us another bow. It became out that Michael was the author of the negative reviews of my restaurant. This naturally resulted in legal action, and the outcome is still pending. Our attorney is certain that Michael will suffer serious repercussions. Michael is undoubtedly waiting tensely for the decision as well. Since then, a different company has taken the position of Michael's restaurant, which was next to mine. In addition to losing business to my establishment, they also experienced problems as a result of mishandled food and inadequate worker training. Strangely enough, the very criticisms Michael had leveled at my business proved to be valid for him as well. The idea that he had been talking about his own company made me chuckle. Later, I received a personal apology from Mr. Thompson. In addition, he asked that we continue doing business together, claiming that Michael had been treated fairly. Michael was probably dismissed since I haven't seen him since. It made sense, given all the damage he wreaked. It is my sole hope that he makes a turnaround in his life and returns to society. In the meantime, my business keeps growing and branching out into new products and services. When I consider them, Jessica's business is also becoming well known for its inclusive employment policies, which foster an environment in which individuals with disabilities can prosper. Businesses that are primarily motivated by self-interest and short-term profitability ultimately fail. In tandem with Jessica, I intend to keep making contributions to society.